welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today I'm excited to be kicking off a brand new Rolling Solo showcase here on the channel for Zombicide, Undead or Alive from Cool, Mini or Not. Inside this video, we're going to go through all the steps of setup to get one of the 10 scenarios from the core box rulebook onto the table. And we're also, in addition to using the core set, we'll be adding in a number of expansion sets from the crowdfunding campaign in order to bolster the Abomination types and also bring in a different zombie type into the fray as well to see whether I can survive such a massacre. So without further ado, let's go through the setup of one of the scenarios, and at the very end of the video, we'll talk about the new entries being added into this core box experience. The first step of setup is to choose a mission. I'm going to skip past the tutorial mission as it's a bit smaller and doesn't have as much going on inside of it. We're going to go instead for mission number 1 called the Bandwagon. The second step of setup is to get the game tiles to the table for the mission you've selected. So for now, we're skipping past reading the narrative of the mission, the objectives, and any special rules. We only really want to focus on the illustration here for the most part in terms of how the game tiles should be laid out once they're all on the table. You can also look at the grid here, which will tell you exactly which game tiles and what side they're supposed to be on. So when you place them down, you know exactly what you're doing. You're going to put them so that they look like this, and after we get all the game tiles down, we'll start putting the tokens, which are all shown on the right hand side here, into play as well. And just like that, for mission number 1 called the Bandwagon, we have the game tiles all set up as illustrated inside the rulebook. We can move on to step number 3, which is about placing tiles and tokens on the game board to complete the setup of the mission. We'll start things off with the spawn zones. We have on the far left and the far right orange mobile spawn zones. We also have an Abomination spawn zone, which comes in inactive on the white X side. It will flip over to its active side once an Abomination comes into play, and if Abomination gets killed off and there's none left on the game board, it will flip back over to being inactive. Way up at the very top, we have the starting spawn zone. It's in yellow and it has a number 1 on it to remind you of this. Next, we have objective tokens. There are 4 red ones. You'll know exactly where to place them based on the illustrations on the game tiles, each having one, and you'll see the crate is opened up with the red X on it. You simply just place one of these tokens on top. So we have 1 in each of the 4 major buildings. We also have 1 blue specific objective token, and that will be buried inside the special rules for this mission. We'll talk more about that when we get into gameplay. This mission also includes a wagon as well as a Gatling gun. You'll also need the noise token, which has a bang side as well as a boom side. It's going to start on its bang side. And that token's going to sit right out in the open with the wagon and the Gatling gun in this area. This is also where the starting miniatures for our heroes are going to enter the mission. Moving on to steps 4 and 5, we need to create a posse of 6 characters or survivors, and because I'm playing solo, I'll be controlling all 6 of them. There are 4 classes, 4 major classes inside the game. I've broken down the heroes from the core box into each of these different sections. We have brawlers right here, couple faithfuls over here, gunslingers, and we have the townsfolk down here. Now, what are the differences? Well, there are some specific differences, but I'll talk about them at a high level here during setup. The brawlers want to get up close and personal and use their melee weapons to take down the zombies. They get bonuses for moving quickly and making attacks. We have the faithful class. They're going to be using their faith and conviction to paralyze the zombies and to be able to destroy zombie nests, which is going to come in super handy. The gunslinger class allows pistol specialists to unload a heap of lead at short range, which can be very useful. And the townsfolk are used in fighting within urban environments because they know where to search for everything. They also have an unlimited cap as to how many times they can search in a turn. Everybody else is capped at 1 inside of their turn, whereas the townsfolk can search over and over and over again. So lots of interesting usages between the classes, and of course each of them have even more specifics behind their abilities we'll get into during gameplay. For now, I just need to pick who is going to be part of my posse. Be sure while choosing your survivors to make up your posse that you check the class limitations section of the mission that you're going on. If it states done, you're all clear and can select from any of the classes available. It might tell you that you can't choose a faithful, for instance, in terms of the class, so you won't be able to select one of those as part of your starting posse if that limitation exists. You will see it detailed right here in this section of the mission page. After going through all the survivors I could choose from, I've selected 6 for my posse here. We have 1 faithful, a brawler, we have 2 townsfolk, and we have 2 gunslingers. I think we're ready to go. Let's get these things into their dashboards. Continuing with step number 5, we get the dashboards in place. We have 3 character dashboards on each side of the scenario or mission map. And on this side, we have Meg, Trixie, and Thomas. I've also gone ahead and grabbed color bases based on my own preferences for each of the characters. Also making sure that the AP track on the bottom of the dashboard is in the 0 position. That stands for adrenaline points. And at the same time, find the trackers, which correspond to the same color you gave your survivor. And I've done the exact same on the opposite side of the table here for Carl, Jeb, and Pablito. Step number 6 is all about setting up decks, and the very first one on the far right-hand side there in blue is the equipment deck. This is where the gear and weapons the survivors are going to be trying to find are housed. We'll be drawing from this deck when we're doing searching, for example. The next one to the left is the zombies deck. This is going to be full of foes that the posse is going to have to face during the game. Of course, the more zombies we take down, the more are going to be coming out of this deck. You'll see how that works as we get into gameplay. And then to the left of that, we have the Abomination deck, and this is going to be a deck that just has a single card if you have just the core box, and if you have more Abominations, you'll get cards for each one of them, which you can add into this Abomination deck. Of course, that'll throw a bunch of variability at you in terms of which nasty, gigantic Abominations are coming to kill you. So, in my case, I am adding a couple expansions in from the crowdfunding campaign, so I'm going to be bringing those into that deck right now. And that's going to be a whole bunch of Abominations coming from the Dead Stock expansion, which has 4 Abominations to add into the fray, and then the Abominape and the Crocosaur. Those 2 Abominations also going in, so we'll have a number of very interesting individuals that are going to be coming after us. And that's not all for the deck we just talked about prior to the Abomination deck. This one right here, the Zombie deck, the Long Dead Walkers expansion is being added in. Cards from this expansion being added in to this deck right here. We'll shuffle them in right now. So the Zombie deck and the Abomination deck getting a boost in terms of what's coming out from the Horde. The next deck to shuffle and place face down is the Bounty deck. You're going to see what type of bounty weapon is on the top of the deck, and it's also going to describe the feat that a player must do in order to collect the bounty reward. And so once that feat has been accomplished, that card becomes their possession. So in this case, we have the Henry Repeater at the very top. I've also placed reference cards for the 2 machines within the game, the Gatling gun and the wagon. They describe right on the card what they do and also reference the fact that they are machines. The final deck we need to put together for step number 6 is the starting weapon deck. We don't need to shuffle this. We move right into step number 7, where the survivors have a favorite equipment type indicated on the top right of their ID card. It's called their favorite weapon slot, and you're going to see it up top. And in this case, it's the pistol for Meg. Now, if you have a pistol as your favorite weapon, then you start with the old timer. If you have a melee weapon in the top right-hand corner, you start with the pan. If you have the rifle as your favorite weapon, it's the Springfield that you get. And if you have any, the player gets to choose between an old timer, a pan, or a Springfield. But you're going into the game with some pretty useless weapons to start. And of course, you're going to be looking to try and search and really lean on the townsfolk to be able to search a lot to try to get better weapons as quick as possible. So Meg is going to get an old timer in her favorite weapon slot. Trixie is going to be entering the mission with a Springfield rifle. Thomas is going to come in with a Springfield rifle. It's worth mentioning that his favorite slot said any in it, so I could pick from any of the 3 starting weapons. I chose a Springfield because I started to look at the skills that Thomas has. He has things like marksman and things like that, and also things that can help boost his damage, so having a long-range weapon with him seems like a good choice. Carl enters the mission with a favorite equipment type as melee, so he gets a pan to start. Jeb's favorite is a rifle, so he gets a Springfield. And the final member of the posse, Pablito, comes in with a favorite as a pistol, so an old timer for him. Now, it is worth mentioning that you want to take a look at the blue skill for each of these characters, and honestly, you want to take a look at the skills for all of them. Take a look at the back of the rulebook and find out what they do, because it'll give you a good indication as to what kind of character you may be trying to build towards to kind of suit your skills and make the best usage of that character, but you're free to really create whatever you want in terms of a weapons combination, so long as it's okay. The favorite weapon slot is just something that has to be specific to that type of weapon to be able to be held in that slot, and it's where starting weapons begin. It's also worth mentioning you might find a blue skill when you're going through your character that actually tells you gain a starting weapon from the beginning of the game. So there are some skills in here which might give you more starting equipment off the hop. Make sure that you check those blue skills to make sure that you don't miss out on those. For my 6 characters in this posse, not a single person gets anything additional beyond the normal 1 equipment piece each. We're now going to bring all the miniatures for our posse into the starting position of the game down here in the south. And just like that, our posse arrives on scene. Step number 9 has us placing all the trackers into the dashboard. Also make sure, as I mentioned before, your AP track is down to 0 to start things off. First, you're going to want to place a tracker in the top red slot of your wound bar, and another tracker in the slot for the first blue skill. Finally, you'll take 3 trackers and place them in the reserve area here, as you'll be using 1 for each of the different color levels as you go up. As you hit yellow, you'll take the yellow, which is an additional action. When you hit orange, you have a choice between 2 orange skills. And when you hit red, you have a choice between 3 skills. If you're playing on ultra red mode, then of course you're looping through, essentially. You're going all the way to the end of your AP bar and then coming back to 0 and continuing to loop through the different categories of skills. And if you're doing that, you'll need more trackers to denote all the skills you're gaining. So that is the reason why there are additional ones here which can be placed in reserve too if you're going down that route. Typically that's for larger scale missions, and of course when you choose to go down that road. Here's a look at half my posse with our character dashboards all set up and ready to go. Worth mentioning, you can also take the starting item, which is sitting in your favorite equipment slot right now, and you can move it to one of your hand slots if you wish. And here's a look at the rest of the posse on the right-hand side of the board. It is worth mentioning, you'll notice a difference with the Brawler when you're putting your pegs in. When starting off the game, the Brawler class gets the advantage of additional health. As you'll see on the health track there, the highest red slot is 3, and that's the starting position of the health tracker peg for every character. Brawlers get 3, everybody else starts at 2. The final step of setup is to give the first player token, which is a sheriff's badge, to the player that's going to begin things off. Now I'm playing solo and controlling all 6 of these heroes or survivors, and so because of this, this token has no meaning to me whatsoever, so I'll be placing off to the side and out of play. Now some additional steps to set up which are worthwhile doing is, of course, to get your dice nearby. In this case, I'm using some special dice that came from the Kickstarter campaign. The regular ones that came with the core box are all red in terms of icons, but the specialized dice that are wooden actually have black and red as they should per each of the different types of card decks, whether it's spades or clubs from black, for instance, or diamonds and hearts being red. You actually have that labeled out on the dice themselves. And then on top of that, you're also going to want to take out all the miniatures, especially the hordes, and put them on the table somewhere close by. And the reason for this is because if you do run out of miniatures, it gives them extra activations during the gameplay. So you're going to want to keep an eye as to how you're managing the amount of zombies coming into play. If you keep them in the box or in a tray, you might not notice it as much. So getting them out on the table is a good idea. Now for me, as I'll be recording the playthrough, I'm going to be keeping all the miniatures out of view and out of sight, but I will be letting you guys know when I start getting low on the reserves of those enemies as we go through gameplay. That's going to do it. That's going to wrap up the setup video for Zombicide, Undead or Alive. Really looking forward to diving into some gameplay. We'll talk more about the narrative around the mission we've chosen. We'll also talk about special rules and the major objectives we're trying to complete in order to win this scenario. Hopefully you'll join me in the next episode where we get into some gameplay. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, keep on rolling solo.